Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for January 20th, 2023. I'm Benji Fisher, moderating and sharing my screen. Also present are Aaron McHale, Christina Chumias, Ralph Kohler, and Simo Helston. So I'm sharing my screen with the issue for today's meeting, which is 3333335. And I'd like to start the meeting just by going over this list that I collected yesterday. These are all of the issues we discussed in the last 3 months of 2022. And some of them have been fixed and closed. Some of them still need work. And I just thought it would be useful to review them briefly. And I think I'm not going to read all the issue numbers as I go through them, but starting in October, we looked at the usability improvements for the project browser. That was a meta issue, which I guess is still active, but probably has child issues that have some progress on them. In the admin page, we changed the word regional to region. That one's been fixed. Renaming tasks for the edit block type permissions. I'm sorry, remaining tasks. That was a very small technical issue that I asked Aaron to work on and got done. I guess I had done the work and I asked Aaron to review it. Add the list content operation to the content type administration page. So that's an idea that's we still need to work on and is part of a more general issue of finding better ways to navigate the admin interface. In the third meeting for October, project messaging channel in core as experimental. I did some follow-up work on that. It seems to have sort of stalled. I think at the moment it needs some sort of designer front-end work, last I checked. The last meeting in October, we talked about moving the custom block library to content, and that may be when we started. That's been a big push in the last few months. And I can give you a little bit of a progress message, or progress update, that what we're currently working on is nailing down the best way to handle the situation when you do change the path of something in Drupal. And we're pretty close, I think. And once we get through that, it sort of removes the hardest part of this whole set of issues, and also gives us a way to move forward for any further changes we want to make in paths in the admin interface. And the last topic for October was move actions administration item under admin config workflow. And I think that was sort of a controversial proposal, not clear that it's a good idea, and that's still marked as what needs work. Shall I just keep going, or do you have any comments on the issues we discussed in October?
I think excuse me. I think yeah, keep what do. It's great to see some of those being closed off, because it's going from week to week. It's so easy to forget where certain issues got to. So it's nice to do this review.
Yeah, I intend to do this every 3 months. We'll see whether I carry through on that. Time will tell. First issue in November was provide an element that converts large radio checkbox options to select list. I think, Christina, you brought that up. And we suggested some changes there. I don't think there's been any work on that recently.
Oh my God, I totally forgot about that.
The Svelte UI for install controllers. This is for the contrib, not project. Yes, the project browser. And we made some suggestions. I think most of those are captured in follow-up issues, and the issue we looked at itself was fixed and closed. And the meta issue for organizing the admin menu and the paths of block items that I mentioned before.
Yeah, just a really brief
Yeah.
thing to mention on that actually is that I have taken the initiative, pun intended, to add another issue into the scope of that, which is maybe another couple of issues actually. One is just around the breadcrumbs and the approach that we could take with the breadcrumbs, which I think we presented before. But there is another one just about the it's kind of a sub item of the the moving the custom block library to content, which is around the adding add a local action on the block library, and it's just around like making it easy to create blocks. And there's some discussion around that because there's things around how things are done about redirects to the place block UI and all that kind of thing. So there's some more issues I suspect will come out of the woodwork, but yeah, things are progressing slowly and but surely on that.
Okay. Yeah. And for the sake of the recording, the meta issue is 3318110. Where was I? So still in November, when batch ID doesn't exist, Drupal should emit a 404. That one's waiting for review. I think they made some changes based on our review. And placement of batch progress messages we discussed just briefly, just sort of as related to that first one. Any other comments on the issues we talked about in November? Okay, and in December, we talked about providing additional methods of navigating the admin interface. That's sort of a blue sky topic, and it includes the earlier suggestion about adding links to content from the content type admin pages.
Yeah, you can blame me for that one. That was all my doing.
Right.
Weird ideas that come out of my brain.
Move custom block library to content. That's part of the meta issue we talked about earlier. Adjust the terminology to changes introduced reorganizing block items in the administration menu. That's yet another issue in that same meta. And our goal, just to keep it in mind, is to have most of these reorganizing issues done for Drupal 10.1, and that means we still have about 5 months. So I think we'll make that deadline. Next meeting in December, cannot expand toolbar items referencing no links or with options no path. And I think that was pretty clear from usability point of view, just needs some implementation. Move custom block types admin link to admin structure. We decided that was the first issue to work on in the block rearrangement, and that's been fixed. Although there is some danger that it will be reverted if we can't figure out the procedure for changing a path, but I think we will. And restrict access to empty top-level administration pages. And that one is sort of controversial. I had some ideas there for a different approach. In the next meeting in December, decide on recategorization of modules for Drupal.org. And that's something that Ralph brought to our attention. And I think we're going to have to return to that when they're further along. And this is for the sake of the project browser initiative. Correct me if I'm wrong. The next meeting, we talked about disable the summary max length options. If summary input is disabled, that's for a contrib module, the max length module. Migration dependencies has inconsistent structure. I just asked for some help on the wording of a change record there. We again talked about custom block types admin link, which again is the first one in that group of issues to be fixed. And the last meeting in December, we talked about two issues: potentially confusing wording in text area widget and Style Olivero's implementation of the forum module to look like a forum. So that was it for the last 3 months. There are two layout builder issues that stuck in my mind from June and July of last year, which unfortunately haven't seen much action since we reviewed them. And one is to add reusable option to inline block creation. And the other is to reorder layout builder sections. And I think both of those would be really good usability improvements. I brought them up in the block layout, in the layouts channel in Drupal Slack yesterday as I was going through this list. I hope we can find someone to work on them. So that's it. Any further comments on these issues?
Just to thank you, Benji, for collecting all those, because I imagine that must have taken quite a bit of time.
Oh, it wasn't that bad. I can be efficient at this sort of thing.
Oh, good.
Okay, I'll stop my screen share. Christina, are you ready to bring up the personas you wanted to talk about?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Yeah, and also thanks for doing all that work. That's a lot of work for sure. Okay. Can you see the browser?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna share the link. Well, I can share the link now on the UX channel. So, okay. I'm preparing these user personas for the admin UI. There are like 4 user personas that I've think of, and I'm gonna dig in now. But first, I wanted to give you some context before going further here, and why I'm actually working on that. So the idea, the need of doing that is that there are 2 initiatives on the oven, 2 things to work on. One is the dashboard thing that we've discussed this several times already here and also in other places. And probably you've already heard about the toolbar, the need to refactor the toolbar. Actually, to modernize the toolbar, and it actually touches a lot of other things like information architecture, how many menus are going to be in there, which menus, like for example, the one that you just mentioned about the content creation menu and so on. So to inform all these decisions that are going to be made at some point in these next months, if these initiatives, those become initiatives and the work starts on each of them, I think it's important to know which users are we actually preparing the features for, what are their needs. And it would ideally be something that could be agreed across the community, and we could do some research. But before just doing some research and I don't know, for example, posting a poll where people can vote on everything or anything, we should have some ground work done. And that's where this document comes from. There are a lot of ways to create user personas. Does everybody on the call know what a user persona is? Does anybody on the call doesn't know what it is?
I have a rough idea.
Okay. Okay, basically what it is a list of tasks the user wants to do, what are their needs and everything. Usually you could see a user persona. So the classical way of seeing a user persona would be something like this, where you have what does person usually do, motivations, the frustrations, and there is some data about like the age or what their name and a photo or something like that. But I don't think that's actually something like that what we actually need. We just need to be informed or what are the needs for the users. For example, there is an example for Drupal.org, and where is it? Here. So there was this analysis created for user personas of Drupal.org, and I think it's a good example because it has the whole analysis for the newcomer, the learner, the expert, and for each of them there is a list of things. Like, for example, the typical thing is to add a photo and give a name and some demographics info that I don't think it's important here. But I think the important things are, for example, the behaviors. What are the things that the user usually do? Like, why is this user doing all these things? What gets frustrated the user? What things are not working well right now on Drupal, for example. Also, which kind of technology the user is used to, if it has access to the terminal, or it just uses the browser to interact with Drupal. So these kind of things. This is information that we need to provide, and this is going to inform the decisions that are going to be made later on. So with all this context, I've come up with these initial 4 personas. Aaron also has a lot of background in this, has information about what we're doing. I'm just gonna go roughly around this, but mainly the goal of bringing this here is showing you this base thing that I've started, and actually work together towards creating those, and ideally come up with all the information that should come here. I don't want to do just this by myself and decide by myself what are the 2 personas for Drupal. The admin interface, I think it's something to gather feedback from the community. So I think ideally the first step is first discuss what should go in here for each. If the personas that I think are needed are these. Also work on the content for each persona, and then publish this and explain this to the whole community and gather feedback from them. So I think this is the goal for today.
Okay,
So
let me interrupt you for a minute. And Simo, Aaron, Ralph, do you have any questions at this point? I have a couple of
go ahead.
points, so I guess first of all, I want to point out that we do often talk at the usability meetings about what sort of person is going to be looking at a particular admin page. Will it be a site builder or a content editor, for example? And I think it will help to standardize that classification. So we'll certainly be making use of this in our weekly meetings. Second, I see the 4 personas you've started with, and I wonder if it would make sense to list them in order of permissions. So I think that the site builder would typically have the most permissions, and then administrator, and then content manager and content editor. So I would put them in a different order. And my last question is, should we have a 5th persona for a site visitor or anonymous? I think there's an open issue to rename the anonymous role to visitor or something.
Benji, wouldn't administrator be higher than site builder though, because they would have all the permissions?
That's what I was having in mind also. Yeah. So this is really great. That is a really good point that we're having this conversation, because we have several different things in mind.
Yeah, I think of the site builder as the person who has access to manage fields on content types, for example, and the site administrator, I don't know, generally has access to the configuration menu rather than the structure menu.
I think we are thinking about two different administrators, and that's actually, this is pointing out that maybe the naming has a problem. So I was thinking when I wrote that as an administrator, as a site, meaning that somebody that actually is trying to update the modules, for example, to see the status of the modules, if they need a security update, for example, like somebody that has this level of things that they can do, usually is closer to the user one permissions, like they usually have all the permissions. Compared to, for example, the site administrator that you would have like on a project when it's delivered, and this person is just having permissions to, for example, change the name of that installation, that site specifically, or something like that. And they don't have permissions to create new content types, for example. And I think those might or might not be the same user persona.
We're talking maybe talking about a maintainer as administrator. So this is a little bit confusing using the same names as we use for user roles, because then we kind of build a parallel there.
Right. I think the intention is to use the same names as for roles. And so what Christine is describing for an administrator is pretty much the administrator role, all permissions. We don't have a role for site builder in Drupal core.
Exactly. Yeah, that's so then about the administrator, does it make sense with what you had in mind? Because you're saying that the administrator on your perspective would have less permissions than a site builder. Site administrator.
I think it makes sense to align the names with the roles. And so I guess my question would be, would we want yet another role for what I had in mind, or maybe what you're calling a site builder is what I had in mind as this sort of persona or sort of user who has permission to the configuration menu, but not the structure menu. So maybe I should ask you to describe what you mean by site builder.
Okay, let's do that. What I had in mind, for example, like for the administrator would be the person responsible for administering the site and having things like, for example, updating the status of the site, like the database or server problems or module security updates or something like that. Laurie here was adding, like, for example, developing new features with custom modules and administer user permissions. That's really something that makes a lot of sense. The site builder would be the person that builds new features through the sites, like creates content types or add new view modes or something like that. This traditionally is something that is more tied to the typical agency that actually creates content types. But yeah, when you deliver the project, and if you have an on-site team, for example, they would be the people like they might not update the modules, but they have the task on Jira to create content types, for example. So that would be the site builder on this sense. And it's basically a person that is working all day with Drupal, and they might not be able to change things like the site name, for example, or something like that, but they have like full access or most of access to the structure, because there is where they create the structure of the site, like the content types, taxonomies, or paragraphs, or I don't know, something like that. Then we have the contributor, which is the person that creates the content itself. And sometimes, and the content manager didn't went forward here because I was not sure about adding this as a person. But I think the tasks that the content manager might be are different from the content editor when the content editor creates its own content. And the content manager might want to see, for example, other tasks, like what other people is working on, like how many content is not published and is waiting for it to be published, or this kind of things. So I think if we say that in Drupal core we want to have like the 80%, or we want to solve just the 80% of cases, because obviously there are more roles that you can see. But if we just want to solve the 80% of the cases, I think these 4, and obviously Anonymous would be the 5. I think those are the ones that I had in mind, but obviously open to discussion. That's what I had in mind. So the floor is for all you now.
Yeah. Would this
Are you
content manager fit the role of kind of a, if it's some kind of a site that provides a service to users, so would this content manager type fit that kind of a customer service people who don't create content but respond to users who are using the site, like maybe commerce site delivering orders or something like that? So
Yeah, so go ahead, sorry.
yeah, so accessing and reading content and reading kind of user output.
So are you asking what are the differences, or what are the
Yeah,
the
so
tasks?
I'm kind of thinking that what content manager would cover. So if we have Drupal sites that are commerce sites, the Drupal sites that are CRMs, and that's kind of where there are people who read stuff but don't and kind of respond to messages maybe, but don't create content as such. So would that be kind of a content manager position? Like would the task be similar?
Yeah. Actually, I'm not 100% sure. This profile came up a few years ago when we proposed to create this. Here it is. To create this content editor, and the feedback that we gathered from the community was that's not enough. You need to separate that. And the content manager is usually the person that is going to, as you were saying, like manage not just the content, but for example, let's say if we have statistics about the quality of the content, then this person would probably have a dashboard with all these statistics placed in there. Like it's more like an overview of other users.
I think like the points you're making there, Simo, as well, like for sites that are CRM sites or commerce sites, what we're doing here is really we're covering what Drupal core provides, because we're using this to influence how we should provide these sort of sensible defaults out of the box. Now, the case of a commerce site and a CRM site is absolutely not going to map onto these. But the thing we have been discussing before is the fact that that's okay, because we know and we recognize that Drupal sites have the flexibility to completely redefine all of the roles and go in and create new roles, and we accept that. But what we can do is provide these like sensible defaults that cover, like Christina said, that 80% use case. And because in core, we don't provide a CRM solution in core or a commerce solution in core, we leave it up to contrib. We can leave those personas, I think, to the contrib space to understand. Like Drupal commerce, for instance, may have their own set of personas, and we shouldn't try to we shouldn't try to what am I trying to say? I feel like we don't want to get in the way of that. We don't want to try and make it harder for them to set their own personas in a way, because it's not something we do in core. We give people the flexibility to define their own roles and their own personas. So this, really is going to help influence what we do in the standard profile, for instance. But it's absolutely okay that people will diverge from this.
Okay, let me just interrupt for a moment. I see that Offer Shaw has joined us. And Offer, I pasted into the Zoom chat the Google Doc that Christina has been showing us. And we're talking about user personas for Drupal. Do you need anything to help you get caught up?
Yeah, I've been here for quite some time, and I saw it. I love this discussion. I remember when we spoke about content editor and content manager before. One thing I want to ask, if it makes sense for personas because of Drupal excellent abilities, is a translator persona or someone that is in charge of working on the multilingual part of Drupal, if that would make sense as a persona, or is that too rare?
I think that should fall between personas, meaning I don't see adding a new persona just for a translating thing. Probably a content editor or maybe a content manager. I would probably say a content editor would be the person that maybe goes and picks content that is already in there and just translates. So it's falling into the basket of another person or into the hat of another an existing
I'm trying
persona.
to think. The reason I bring it is because correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're creating personas because that would allow us in the future, as we remove features, to see, how does it affect these people as they're doing things. I just know in multilingual, there's so much that is still desired to be added, even though Drupal does amazing things that we can do already in core. And I didn't know if by creating a translator, we'll have more emphasis on improving these features or give more attention to the differences of what happened when more than one language is on a website.
That's important.
Yeah, actually, I think a translator would need, from this, how I understand this, translator would need some of the site builder permissions for translating content type, like field labels or menu items that content editor maybe wouldn't be able to touch.
Right, and in the Zoom chat, Ralph is agreeing with Christina and Simo that this falls under content editor. And I guess as long as we mention translation in the document, we can always return to it later and decide whether it should have a separate persona. Aaron, you want to say something?
Yeah, I think on translations, I would see that as in a multilingual site. Like, if we think of what a content editor does, they've got if we think about it in terms of like a workflow, the workflow of content, right? So they create content, they're editing it, it goes from draft through to review. Part of that workflow will probably, I say probably because I don't work on many sites with translations. I think probably would be creating those multilingual bits of content, and that might be a dedicated step in the workflow. But equally, depending on how much multilingual content there is, that could just be an element of the initial drafting of the content. And so that I think I support the idea that is an element of a content editor role. And then the content manager role is again kind of the final stage of the workflow, going from review through to publishing. I see the content manager role as the kind of person, and this is sort of when we were talking about the permissions they would have. We talked about this as well. The kind of workflow permissions. I think that's something that they would, they would be publishing the content, and I see that kind of pattern in the teams I work with at the University of Edinburgh, where we have teams of content designers led by senior content designers. And in those teams, all of the content designers, practically, they have publishing permissions, right? That the senior content designer might act as the content manager and be reviewing that content before it gets published. Or in that case, the subject matter expert, if it's to do with a specific, an academic type content or something, would be reviewing and signing that off. In the case where we have content that gets translations, not much content, but there's some content that gets translations for Scottish Gaelic, for instance, there is a dedicated step of that content being sent to a specific person that will do translation and come back. But again, that's part of the workflow of editing and publishing content. So yeah, it's probably sits somewhere, as Christina said, somewhere between those two roles, but it really depends on how your business processes are ultimately structured, what you care about.
Yeah, I want to add, the reason I bring it is so I think all of us did see before a Drupal site that has a tab says translate. You click translate and here someone can translate. But I think in real life scenario, once a site have more than one language, there's so many things that I wish to see views being improved, like the whole mechanism of, even in umami, right? Like, what happened if we have one recipe in one language and not the other? Should it be shown or not? Like, there's so much functionality that currently is missing, because you can always write a module. But I thought that once that complexity is added to the mix, we will be able to add more of that. The whole management of, there's more than one language, there's more concern, and there's so many more things to take care of, which, yeah, the translator personas kind of need to manage that, besides just take a piece, translate it to a language, hit save.
Just to point out that I added on the content editor that the content editor translates content into the site builder. I added that it translates the user interface, just to add some more info there.
I guess it also depends, like, how, practically, like the things we're going to use these for are to help us build out these persona-based dashboards, or to help us understand how we should be structuring the admin UI going forward. I made the distinction in an issue, and I think it was on the meta issue for blocks, that the tasks that different people do in some ways nicely map onto the admin UI structure. Like, we've got the content tab and then the structure tab, and we kind of group things nicely under each area. So, like, the content editor, content manager does a lot of stuff inside the content tab. The structure tab is, your site builder is working in there, and then the other tabs are probably more administrator. But so I get, I suppose it's what is the, if we're thinking about translations, like, do we add a translation persona to this? And I don't know if we should or not, but I suspect from what we're trying to get out of this, it may be, it may be enough to say it is a part of one of those other personas.
Saying the word dashboard, I start thinking that I think content editor usually interacts with his or her own content. Content manager interacts with other people's content, and translator takes input from other people's content, and output is own content. And site builder doesn't care so much about content. So that's my idea.
Actually, I should point out, actually, Offer, we did explicitly mention when we're talking about dashboards, we specifically did talk about a dashboard elements for translating. I think that came up for translations. And so one of the things we've been looking at is the idea that you could have dashboards that aren't necessarily tied to a particular persona, but multiple personas may care about those. Analytics is a great example of that. Like there could be an analytics dashboard that's dedicated to reports on from Google Analytics, right? So that we might not necessarily have an analytics persona, but there is absolutely a use case to say, well, the content editor and the content manager probably both care about analytics, in the same way they probably both care about the translations of the content that is going through their workflows.
Yeah. Just FUI, this dashboard that we're talking about is something that it just on the open. We've had just 1 or 2 meetings, and it's more like on the technical side of how to create dashboards. And we really need to come here with a proposal and then start talking about the dashboards. It's not that it's happening behind this group or that we don't want to share. It's just that that's not work that it's actually even to discuss, because we still don't know exactly the technical side of that. So I hope Aaron will be able to come soon with that proposal, and we can all discuss with all these about the dashboards. It's just that I didn't share that much because there is not that much to share, and especially because these user personas are way more important if we even want to have an informed conversation or discussion about what needs to be on each dashboard, or what are the differences between the dashboards for site builders and content editors, for example. So I think this conversation about user personas needs to happen first, and then based on that we will be able to actually discuss what needs to happen with dashboards, just so you have context about that.
So we have about 15 minutes left. Christina, what sort of input do you most want to get from us at this point?
Basically I need help to finish these user personas, or to not finish Blight, but to have something that is ready to share with the rest of the community. So I need 2 things. First, feel what is in here on one side, and I'm not sure which is the best way to do that altogether. And second, there is the need to discuss where this is going to be published and how we're going to gather feedback from the community. So those are the 2 main points here. So if you want to discuss first the first, which is fill all these first initial proposal for the user personas, is a Google Doc something that works for you to suggest, or do you want to work asynchronously, or do you want to have a specific meeting for that, or do you want to discuss this on the next meeting and work on that together?
We all have the link to edit the document, and Google Docs are good for asynchronous work. So let's right now do the part that can't be done asynchronously, and go to your second question about how we're going to promote or publish this. Does that sound good?
Okay, so I think since we are all used to Drupal issue queue, I would say probably the first would be to create an ideas issue, and then propose all this information on there. Once we have this initial proposal, I will propose that in there. I think that's the best way, like to have a link where we can send to people, either promote that on Twitter or promote that on the next newsletter or something like that, and to ask people to give feedback. At least that's what we did at the beginning with a content editor, for example, and it really worked out. So I think that would be the idea that I had in mind. Then what other people think? What do you think?
I was, I think I mentioned this morning. I was also mindful of what worked quite well when we did the, the meta issue for blocks reorganization, was having a a quick presentation, at least from my perspective, I could take to various internal groups, and I managed to get some quite good feedback that way. I don't know if I wonder if we could condense it into a quick presentation that we could present. And I know like Ralph and others did presented at various meetup groups and things like that. So that could be another good way once we feel confident in this, once we feel confident enough in what we've got here. That could be a good way to get some good feedback.
That's right.
Okay, I'll volunteer to start some sort of a deck for presentations. I have the tools set up to do that. Christina, will you create the issue? I think the ideas queue is the right place for it.
Yeah, I would. Yes, I will create that. If that's okay for you, I would wait until we have this document prepared
And
before publishing it, like to have like an initial proposal that is more finished.
okay, and you mentioned promoting it on Twitter. That is so last year. I just created.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm
account.
sorry. I know. I said it and I was like, oh, Twitter is not a place anymore. Anyway, you got it. All people, I didn't even use it anymore. But yeah, you got it. You understood me. Yeah. So what about this document? I shared that on the UX channel. Everybody feel free to either edit or suggest things in the document, and we can review it. Hopefully, I will be able to join next week. I won't be able to join the week later, but the week after that. But the next week, I might be able to join, and then we can review the document.
Yeah, I think time boxing it is a good idea. Otherwise, we could sit there for weeks and keep chipping away at it. So, well, it sounds good. Yeah, it'd be good if everyone here could put some time into thinking about it.
Great. Then we can discuss next week exactly the next steps. But I think once we have all these, just posting that on the ABS issue queue and ask everybody for promotion and feedback will be the perfect next step.
Okay,
Yeah.
Alpha, Ralph, Simo, do any of you have ideas for next steps? You're all muted, so
Nope.
okay.
That sounds good.
And just to also, because people can use the comments feature of the document, so that's probably again a good way to, rather than maybe trying to comment in Slack threads and things, let's maybe use the actual inline comments in the document. Is probably a good a good way to keep the discussion close to where it's happening.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think the early stages of this document, we should not be shy about just adding things.
Exactly.
Worry about narrowing it down later on, but at this stage, let's just, if something seems like it might be a good addition, go ahead and add it.
Does Google Docs have I don't know exactly because does Google Docs have a tracked changes kind of feature?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I spend most of my days in Word documents, so I don't.
Oh, you
know.
have my sympathy.
Yeah. Luckily, mostly they're online, so that you can do everything you can do in Google Docs. But
I think there is a history, and I
Ralph
don't know
points
where.
out it's in the chat bubble on the upper right.
Oh yeah, there's a history. Okay, there we go. I think it's slightly.
Common.
I know within Word with track changes, you can see like almost like inline kind of revisions of something being added, removed, and then you can accept those changes. So I didn't know if it had something similar to that.
Yeah, you can either edit it directly or you can make suggestions.
Yeah.
Oh, suggested edits. Okay, all right.
Yeah,
But
feel free to do whatever you feel more comfortable with.
But it doesn't have blame.
Well, actually, I think it does somehow, something like that. I thought there was some kind of history. Anyway, whoever does whatever, feel free. I mean, I'm 100% sure you won't be worse than me because I'm not a native English speaker and I really write strange things in a mix of Catalan and English. So don't be ashamed of writing whatever. Or if you don't know where to post it, maybe you can add on the top, and then I'm not sure if this could go to content manager or content editor or whatever. Feel free. This is a working document, so any help is way more valuable than any error. So, well, you understand what I mean. So, yeah. That's all
Good.
for me.
Okay. I think maybe unless anyone has anything they'd like to bring up, maybe we'll end the meeting a few minutes early today.
Sure.
I of course never believe in dragging out meetings just to fill out the hours. So thank you all for coming. And as I said, I'll start a document we can use for presenting this at meetups and such. And you can all, of course, help with that. And we'll come back to this next week and see what else is on the agenda. Thanks again for coming.
Thanks,
That's
everyone.
great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.